Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much for joining me here. Hope you're having a phenomenal day. Congrats to our community members here for some awesome profits. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The key takeaway here is that we broke through our key level resistance here, and a lot of it has to do with a fundamental catalyst. We had PPI come through here hot with a 2.6%, down from an expected 3.3. So that's a very, very good sign. We're going to talk about that and a lot of other key factors here today. Be sure to stick around. All right, folks, before we jump into the back-end data here, we're going to double check some important stuff with just some polls for starters, kind of see what your thoughts are here. And roughly 80% of you feel on crypto Twitter that we are looking to hit that CME gap upwards of 117,000 and see that filled this week. Roughly the same percentage here, about 83% of you on crypto to YouTube, essentially feeling the same way. Now, I'm not sure if that narrative has changed or why. Perhaps you watched my video from yesterday and you feel a little bit more on the bullish side like myself, but there's a lot of reasons why we're more likely to break higher with that potential cup and handle pattern breakout we had yesterday. Obviously, PPI data came in here nice and hot today, so that's a very good sign. But the overall sentiment here is that we're looking pretty decent. Now, let's touch on the PPI here first and foremost, just kind of touch on some bullet points, because what happens is when we see deflation, so to speak, and PPI comes down, that's kind of indicating we have more propensity for no inflation and also a potential rate cut. So we have a lot of good things here kind of forming because of that, and that's going to be very helpful later this month. Now, if you're not familiar with the fundamentals for this month, I recommend jumping over to our news section here in our Discord. I also have a Telegram as well that has the same functionality there, but we have PPI today. Bear in mind, CPI data coming in tomorrow as well. And then obviously the interest rate data meeting on the 18th of September, roughly a week from tomorrow. So that's kind of where we're at there in the overall sense. So you're not, if you're not familiar, be sure to familiarize yourself with that. And then just to kind of touch on the back end data here, we can kind of see a pretty significant disparity. We're at about a 4-to-1 ratio here for ETH. Anyone taking short positions with ETH is getting hammered. And then same thing here with Solana. Look at that. That's like a 12.5 to 1 ratio. That means 12. you're like 90% likely to get squeezed out if you're in a short position on Solana. So if you saw my video from yesterday, there's a reason why we are long on Solana and not taking shorts, because it has every reason to not take a high risk short. First of all, Litecoin 32% profit there from a previous trade and a recent trade. Solana 57% profit, BNB 25%, and of course my little favorite there, Ondo. We held on to that one with a little bit left profit there at about 44%. So congrats once more to our committee for that. That is excellent news. Let's touch on some other things here really quick with the back-end data, just with the market overview, kind of give you some perspective. Fear and Green Index is still in the low 40s. It's fine. That's normal. That's kind of standard stuff. But the overall sentiment here is it's still fearish to neutral. Okay, and that's generally a place in which you want to consider buying. Now, I'm not telling you to take everything you got and put all into crypto right now. But generally speaking, you should have been or should continue to dollar cost average as the price goes down or sideways, because once more, altcoin season index is showing significant strength. We have 1.67 trillion now in altcoin market cap. That's essentially a very, very good sign, showing a lot of strength in altcoins. There's some outliers, of course, that are not doing so well, but the key takeaway here is that altcoins are maintaining above that $1.5 trillion market cap support. And basically at this point, it doesn't make a ton of sense to sell your bags. We're not in a position where we're going to see the price significantly pull back here in the near future. So just keep in mind, those are some really good signs here. Now, we can see ETF net inflow is running kind of flat, roughly. That's roughly 2 days ago, of course. There's always a delay in the ETF net inflow or outflow data. So keep in mind that's a little bit delayed, but once more, we can see that's kind of running flat from earlier in the week. That was that indecisiveness we saw on Monday. So just keep in mind, it's a very consistent situation there where we see ETFs essentially kind of guiding the direction of the trend, right? And we look here, of course, at the weekly time frame. This just gives us some perspective here that we are still in really good shape. As I mentioned previously, 109,000 was that previous high. Retest is a new low here after consistently retesting it as a resistance. So now that we've broken free from that level, there's a solid chance that's a new low here for us. We're also maintaining above the 20 SMA and of course the 50 as well. So that's a very, very good sign there overall. Looking at the 3-day, we've talked about this previously, but of course we're above our GC channel here, or our GC. We can also recognize we're above 50 in the RSI. and sorry, 50 on the SMAs, but also we're starting to swing up here a little bit on the MACD convergence. So if we continue to go sideways and up, there's a strong chance we're going to continue to retest and or break 124,000. Once more, this is just kind of a little outlier here. This is nothing you want to base a trade off of, but it is important data nonetheless. Looking at the back end here as well, we can see 114 upwards 116,800, roughly just say 114 to 117 is that CME gap. We had a candle wick up there to about 115, so the truth is we got a little bit smaller of a gap here left remaining, but once more that's still present from roughly what is it? That was back on the 22nd of August. So it's definitely looking like we're going to get that filled. So I do side on the consistency of seeing that CME gap getting filled here soon. I have it on the charts as well, just to give it a little bit more perspective, help you see a little easier on the charts. But the concept here is if we close above 113,000 a day, then further upside would seem to be very practical. So to me, I'm going to be leaning more towards a long position with Bitcoin if we get a solid closure in that level or higher. And what I'm looking for is a solid daily candlestick closure, because what this does is tells us that we've broken through our local resistance here with a significantly bullish candle. Okay, and those are all things we want to look for. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and jump into the back-end data here and kind of just quickly reference some important factors here. Now, when we take a look here at this data here, when we want to look at a couple of things here. First of all, top trader volume is super high right now. Okay, and generally speaking, the volume is going to be high for them when they have more confidence in the direction we're heading. Okay, and that's usually a good sign. We also want to look at here as well. This guy here, we can recognize this is just the volume delta. So this is basically these positions under $1,000, and this is kind of just retail traders, right? So that's pulling back as people are starting to take profits. We're seeing the same thing with institutional traders too, right? So we're seeing a significant pullback or correction. But what's interesting is whale traders are starting to become much more active at this level. And that leads me to believe we're going to be continuing a bit further up, because once more volume is high with high volume traders. And we also see the average volume, not just the delta, but also the amount of liquidation or correction. This is the margin. We're looking at the margin here. If you have high margin and of course high volume, those two things usually imply further upside. At least just in my knowledge here, based on looking at this stuff daily, those things usually correlate to further potential higher. In other words, squeezing out a lot of those shorts that got hit pretty hard yesterday. All that being said, let's look here at Bitcoin open interest and kind of just see where we're at, because I mentioned yesterday we were in this little range between 111 and 113. We've since broken that, and we can see that significant amount of support at 113,000. Keep in mind, open interest is just a quick representation of support below the price or resistance above. Right now, we can see 115,000 as that next potential barrier. And then, of course, 116 as a secondary to that. But the general concept here is we get a bullish back test of 113,000. Along in that range seems practical at this point. All that said, liquidation long delta is now at 8 billion. Keep in mind, Bitcoin, when it continues to run, it can see 20 to 40 billion on average. So we're halfway to that low area of overextension. If we look here as well, we can recognize 115 to 116,000 is kind of that next area of liquidation, specifically 114.5. So I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin runs towards that level either now or after data comes in tomorrow for CPI. But keep in mind, that's a fundamental catalyst nonetheless, and it's important to recognize that that's a factor we cannot equate for. What we can see here, though, is open interest is at 99%. This is the delta for open interest. Anytime that's over about 70%, the propensity for further upside is higher. Okay, now I don't know how the equation works here very well, but I know that every day that I look at this, when open interest is high, sustainability at the current price point is higher. That's generally the concept there, okay? So that's where I think open interest is extremely beneficial and a positive contributing factor here in this context. All that said, daily time frame, once more looking for 113,000 or higher. We can see rejection here tentatively. Keep in mind, the price didn't just stop there because of a simple moving average here. But the SMA is kind of letting us know that on a 50-day SMA, we still haven't broken through that barrier, but we're maintaining above the 20. That's a good early indication of further upside. Another good indication of further upside is breaking through 50 in the RSI. I've talked about this for the last couple of days being a super important confirming factor, letting us know we're back on the right side of the tracks there. Now, we're just going to magically continue higher because of this? No. It's just one of those things that it kind of gives us confidence and confirmation continuation, so to speak. We're on the right side of tracks now. Same thing here as well with the money flow index increasing. MFI above the RSI, specifically above 50, is a super important factor. And we're seeing MACD continue to converge here. So I think this is just the beginning of this continuation. I think 117,000 is very likely. Will we see that this week? It really depends, I would say, on CPI data tomorrow. If that comes in good, or as expected, then I think we're going to be in a position where the price will continue higher. We may see a quick rinse of these late longs first, and then the price continue up. So I'm looking for an interest. I'm interested in a long at the $113,000 range. That's kind of my concept there. Roughly what I'm looking at. Everything else on the 4-hour time frame looks fantastic, except for the fact that we are still below the 200-day SMA. So we are seeing some confluence there. 114,000 has both the impactful SMAs on both the daily and the 4-hour time frame, kind of letting us know we haven't truly broken bullish yet, but we're super close to being on the verge of doing so. All right, so these are all really, really good contributing factors. So I like what I see here so far. I've got my vote on Bitcoin going higher is higher or greater, if you will. Okay, what are your thoughts? Why don't you comment below? Let me know. Love to hear it. And let's go ahead and take a look here at the next altcoin. All right, folks, before we get started here, I just want to touch on a quick little promotion here from 2Bit. New exchange we're working with there just as a nice little alternative for you. There's some really solid deposit and trading challenge rewards here for them. This is available until the end of the month. So be sure to check that out. Link down below for that. Now let's go ahead and take a quick look here at Ethereum, kind of see what's going on in the overall sense, because this coin is definitely breaking bullish, but hasn't fully yet. So when I was looking at this yesterday, I urged caution in taking a long or a short, and that it's recommended not to short the bottom, but also that it was looking very bearish. So that still holding strong in a sense as far as a bearish divergence is concerned, but we have broken above this midway point here, and I want to talk about that, and obviously some back-end data too. See if this is really telling us that there's going to be a reversal here for us. Because once more, you want to be kind of cautious and careful just diving into a long or a short at this point when things initially pump after a good fundamental catalyst. All right, so let's take a look here. This is the last 1 month's worth of open interest, and recognize we got that significant resistance wall at 4,500. That is the most amount of volume we see for this coin. That was worked as a support level for a short while, but we've seen multiple attempts to break that here recently without avail. So all that being said, we can see here that 4370 is kind of that closer area of support. That's the local high. So we're going to pay attention to that. I'll draw that out on the chart so you can understand and see that. When we look here at liquidation delta, we're at 8 billion here as well for ETH. That's roughly the same as Bitcoin. So it's a good sign, kind of letting us know we have just as much volume in ETH and Bitcoin right now, but it also kind of implies we're moving one-to-one with Bitcoin. In other words, Bitcoin pumps, ETH will do the same. So it's not really a coin you generally want to try to invest into. Now, long-term, different story altogether. But if you're looking for short-term continuation, if Bitcoin pulls back a little bit, I think ETH will too. Right? It's kind of one of those one-to-one ratios here. But we look at the open interest. Sorry, this is liquidation on the left-hand side. Look at how much liquidation just got hit here at 44.50. That is uncanny. That's like a super strong candle that comes up there just to swipe, what, 2 billion, 2 billion, 3.6, 2.4. Like that is about like probably in the range of 10 to $15 billion that just got destroyed between 44 and 44.50. So that's whale trading 101, folks. They do that a lot. So that's why you want to be very careful with high leverage or just, watch your trades very close. All that said, let's look at the daily and kind of work our way down and kind of recognize that this coin still looking fairly bullish on the daily time frame. Okay, we had some early signs here of potential reversal, kind of hanging out at that 50 level. Money flow index is low, stochastic swinging up. Not really a good combination, honestly. So the daily time frame does kind of look like it wants to continue to break down, but today's candle here so far, that response to that positive fundamental catalyst from Bitcoin, generally a good sign. Okay, so once more, when coins do this and they give you like multiple conflicting factors, you generally don't want to trade them. I don't really plan to trade ETH at this point, just based on what I see here so far. It's just too high a risk. We're also still inside of a bearish type of channel, right? Once more, 4,500 is at top, 4,300 is at low bottom. So overall, not the greatest circumstance here for ETH until we close above this $4,400 range, that 0.618 fib level, and the 200 SMA. I'm not really interested in taking a long, even though we do have some positive confirming factors here on the 4-hour time frame, letting us know that further upside is likely. So not necessarily the kind of situation I like to trade into, because when a coin is like fully bearish one day and now today it looks like it wants to break bullish, it's hard to want to trust that. So once more, too much too many conflicting factors for me to warrant a long position or to recommend you do either. I would steer clear of ETH for the moment, but long term, big picture, I do think ETH is going to continue higher overall. Its macro structure is still decent, so just keep that in the back of your mind. I wouldn't consider selling your ETH. Like I got in pretty heavy about 1,500 on my investment there, and I'm not going to touch it honestly until I retire. That's just how I am with ETH and Bitcoin personally. All that being said, looking here at Solana, let's go ahead and double check a couple of things. When we look at Solana, this coin has been super bullish, and I did mention you do not want to short this coin yesterday, and obviously there's a reason for it. What, 58%, even though we took this trade 11 days ago, it's still a very strong consideration. We averaged in very heavy in the low 205 to 210 range. Now, all that being said, overall, the circumstances here are still very bullish. We could still pull back, even though we had a double top yesterday. That's exactly the reason why we don't trade those kind of patterns, okay? So friendly advice, when you see bullish or bearish type of divergences from a pattern alone, and then everything else is screaming the opposite direction, you don't take the trade because of a simple pattern. Anyways, okay, so Solana, 1 month back-end data here, we can see 205 to 210, that solid amount of support. Still there, nothing much has changed. We're seeing an extra added amount of open interest at 218, 219. So that's the potential new support level for us. When we look here at liquidation long delta, it's at 5 billion. That's quite a lot here for Solana. Generally, it caps out at 2 to 3 billion. So we're absolutely overextended here from a liquidation or a back-end point perspective, essentially. But for right now, everything's been swept here locally. We don't really have any conditions where we're going to be seeing the price push too much higher because of back-end incentive type of scenarios here. So as long it looks like people are stopping, they're slowing down on trying to sell this coin or short this coin. Now, when we take a look at the daily time frame, everything's fully bullish. There's not much to really note here. We got significant convergences on all time frames. Everything's the same as it was yesterday. It's still very bullish. So generally speaking, in that circumstance, while it is a strong coin and it's overextended, the likelihood of it pulling back is pretty low, honestly. And even if it were to pull back, how much are you going to gain off of it, right? It seems like it's very strong right now, and there's no reason to consider shorting against it. If the price were to pull back, keep in mind local highs, which is this 217, 218 range, is a potential next area of retracement. Okay, so we could hypothetically see the price pull back to that level. Now I've got my fib levels pulled up here from yesterday to kind of give you perspective on overextension if the price were to continue higher. So oftentimes you will see the 1.618 fib level retested, and if that is the case, then we may see roughly the 232 range here for us. Once more, it's more of a predictive indicator, not always the best gauge, but when you're in relative recent price discovery, that's a pretty big deal sometimes. And now we can zoom out here, of course, and look at previous timeframes and recognize that we do have a lot of confluence here at about 256. That is this range here. That's where we saw the price action have a lot of difficulty closing above that level. So just a place to kind of consider for future reference. I'm not proposing you hold a 255, but that would be a solid consideration for a profit target if the price were to continue higher. Just some food for thought. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, let's move on to SUI here, kind of let you know. We are overextended here, of course. We're at a 9 on TD sequential on the daily time frame. So kind of remember that. We'll also remember 360 is that solid amount of resistance based on multiple retests in the past. Now, do you just short 260 because of that? Definitely not. Every circumstance is different, but we are starting to see some larger reasons why this may be the case. And what I mean by that is we got open interest at 360 as well. When we have a lot of confluence at one area, then it increases the odds of resistance. So if we're seeing that, those are all kind of happening together, we can presume that 360 will be a resistance for us. All that said, taking a look here at the liquidation delta, it's at 200 million, so you don't necessarily want to try to short against that kind of buying pressure. There's also a lot of liquidation at 363 to 370. So to me, even though we have a lot of resistance in this range, we see all that liquidation above and the bulls reclaiming control of this coin or continuing to remain in control of this coin. Those are distinct probabilities of further upside. Okay, so overextension means very little if you've done any kind of trading in crypto, you'll know that overextension is it doesn't really matter too much because coins can just continue to go bonkers, right? All that said, we've got a lot of contributing factors here with the RSI over 50, with MACD converging, stochastic swinging down a little bit into the resistance. So truth is the 4-hour time frame, if that looks bullish, then we are in pretty good shape here to see a further continuation. Keep in mind, we do have the 200-day, sorry, that's the 50-day SMA there at about 360 as well. So another confirming factor that 360 is a resistance. But if we look here, 4-hour time frame, we've broken above all moving averages, and we're also maintaining over 50 in the RSI and MACD converging. So while we do have a lot of confluence at 360, from a macro perspective, that is somewhat of a resistance, right? We got to recognize that. Outside of that one thing there's way more positive contributing factors on the time frames, multiple time frames, letting us know that further upside makes sense. Once more, Bitcoin pulls back, we're going to see SUI pull back too. That's just the kind of the way it goes. But it is responding a lot stronger to the upside than Bitcoin is, or most other altcoins. So this coin has more propensity for further upside. So the truth is, the statistical data here tells us that we're more likely to go higher than lower. That's the concept there. So however you want to manage that on your own, let me know. I'd love to hear it. We did profit pretty well here on SUI, actually, as a recent trade here. What was it, 36% in 3 days? I think our third profit target is coming up here soon. Taking a look here at XRP. Let's double check a couple of things here. We actually have a long position open with XRP. Our take profit, I think, is 303, the local high. Let's go ahead and see what's going on here with this coin, if it's worth investing in. But as of yesterday, I was pretty bullish on XRP. As far as the structure is concerned, we have a solid support at 295, which we can see held really strong here yesterday. That 295 support for open interest. We can also recognize too, liquidation long delta is approaching 1 billion, which is quite a lot for this coin. And if we recognize too, there's also in the last 7 days a lot of liquidation between 304 and 308. So a take profit target between now and 310 would seem sensible. If we look at the charts though too, in the daily time frame, we have broken our descending trend. I think I pulled this, remove this here, but generally speaking, from the macro perspective, depending on if you use candle wicks or candlesticks, we've broken our short-term descending trend line. Or actually, it's more so a macro descending trend. Ever since July 22nd, we were in a lower high, lower low pattern. Now we're essentially establishing higher highs and higher lows, and we're breaking into our key level resistance range at $3. So just note, that's kind of where we're at there overall, but we're above 50 in the RSI. Money flow index is right there with it. We can see MACD is still converging, and the 4-hour time frame had multiple confirming factors here, with the price action more likely to go higher. We're now over our 200-day SMA, and if we look at our SMAs, or sorry, our indicators down here, we can recognize stochastics now swinging up, money flow index increasing, above the RSI specifically, and MACD starting to converge here on a MACD-FU. So that's exactly the reason why you don't trade MACD divergences solely. That's why you use combining factors. So if you have heard anything from this video, I want you to take this away. Make sure you understand that trading with confluence is super important, okay? Multiple things. If everything is pointing in one direction and this magical indicator is pointing a different direction, don't take a trade based on that magical indicator, right? There's no such thing as a one size fits all for an indicator. So the important thing that we want to recognize here is that the majority of these coins we looked at today are very bullish. And the reason why is because they're responding well to the PPI data, Bitcoin's doing well, money's flowing into most of these coins. But we don't take short positions on these coins because they show a lot of convergences. So I just highly recommend you make sure you consider trading, once again, with multiple confirming factors, not just finding a special indicator and thinking it's going to work out well for you. You actually have to put in work to be able to trade well. That's the concept there. But hey, with good work comes good rewards, right? So once again, congrats to our community members for some pretty solid profits here. These coins are rocking and rolling. It's been an awesome experience. So thanks again for being a fantastic part of my life. I look forward to working with you if you want to become a better trader. CryptoCash.tech is a site link down below. Other than that, be safe out there, and I hope to see you again soon. See you again tomorrow. All right, take care. Bye-bye.